As the First World War was drawing to a close, a new and terrifying enemy emerged. The Spanish flu. It spread with terrifying speed, infecting 1/3 of the global population. In a matter of months, it claimed, the lives of an estimated 50 to 100 million people, leaving a scar on humanity that would be remembered for generations. Entire communities were wiped out, and the world was left to mourn the sheer magnitude of the devastation.
Fast forward several centuries, and humanity faced another unimaginable catastrophe. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, swept through Europe in the 14th century with a ferocity that sent the medieval world into chaos. This deadly pandemic claimed an estimated 25 million lives, about a third of Europe's population at the time. Towns became graveyards, markets emptied, and fear became a constant companion. In recent history, the world witnessed the terrifying spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Starting in late 2019, it quickly swept across the globe, bringing economies to their knees, overwhelming healthcare systems, and changing everyday life. Social distancing, masks, and lockdowns became the norm. And over 7 million lives were tragically lost despite modern medical advancements and technology.
Now, the question looms large. Can humanity survive a zombie apocalypse? And if so, how?
The prion outbreak has shattered any semblance of normalcy and thrown humanity into the darkest chapter of its history. It began silently, unnoticed at first, within the walls of a research lab. Scientists were experimenting with protein therapies when a mutated prion escaped into the environment. It wasn't a virus or bacteria, but something much more insidious, a misfolded protein capable of causing other proteins in the brain to misfold as well. The first few cases were dismissed as isolated incidents. However, as days turned into weeks, it became clear that this was an unprecedented crisis. Within months, the infection spread like wildfire, devastating countries and continents. This prion was unlike anything seen before. It didn't merely infect, it transformed. The infected exhibited signs of severe neurological damage, their brains twisted and warped into a primal state. They lost their humanity, becoming aggressive, mindless hunters. It was as if the world had turned into a horror film overnight, where fiction bled into reality.
Over 3 billion people worldwide fell victim to the prion, succumbing to the madness it brought.
Cities once teeming with life now lay in ruins, overtaken by hordes of the infected. Governments crumbled under the weight of the crisis, unable to stop the relentless spread. It was a pandemic that didn't just threaten lives, it threatened the very essence of what it meant to be human.
As the pandemic raged on, the remaining uninfected had to confront the unthinkable: survival in a world overrun by what were essentially zombies. The strategies for survival were grim and fraught with danger. Some sought refuge in bunkers, desperate to find safety underground. Across the globe, thousands of bunkers offered a brief respite from the horror on the surface. In the United States, an estimated 20,000 private bunkers had been built for emergencies, and Russia had another 10,000. Countries like Switzerland and Sweden, known for their extensive civil defense preparations, opened up networks of underground shelters. These bunkers, however, became the domain of the wealthy. Stockpiled with food, water, and supplies, they could sustain life for many years. Underground tunnels also present a viable option for those seeking refuge. Cities like Gaza have an extensive network of tunnels, some extending over 100 kilometers in length. These tunnels provide a relatively secure environment away from the prion infected. For those who managed to find refuge in these bunkers and tunnels, the isolation was their shield. However, the reality was harsh. Resources were finite. Most of the survivors found themselves struggling to gather food and water, making the bunker life a grim and temporary solution. People could venture outside only in small, carefully coordinated teams to scavenge for supplies. Every trip outside was a gamble, with the infected lurking in every shadow. Hiding underground wasn't a long-term answer. The scarcity of resources and the psychological toll of being isolated from the world made it a short-lived strategy. Only the super-rich could truly withstand years underground, while the rest had to look for other options. That's when some turned their eyes to the remote mountain areas, hoping nature might provide a safer sanctuary. Survivors found fresh water and arable land in the mountains, far from the dense urban centers. These remote regions, such as the Andes, the Himalayas, and the Rockies, offered a chance for a new beginning. Here, they could forage, hunt, and try to cultivate food. Communities formed, building fortified settlements that could provide a measure of security.
However, even these areas were not free of danger. The infected, driven by primal instincts, began to appear, even in these high-altitude regions. They climbed and wandered, continuing the spread of the prion to places once thought safe. It was a constant battle to maintain these communities. Walls were built, watchtowers were manned, and every night was spent in fear of an attack. The harsh reality was that, while these mountain refugees offered temporary safety, the infected were relentless. The ultra-rich have turned their attention to isolated islands that offer a potential sanctuary from the horrors on the mainland. Places like New Zealand, with its geographical isolation and robust natural defenses, have become prime targets for those seeking refuge. Other islands such as Iceland, with its remote location and geothermal activity, providing natural barriers, and the Falkland Islands, far from major population centers, are also being explored for their potential safety. These islands, with their minimal human traffic and natural seclusion, provide a chance to escape the prion-infested chaos and preserve their way of life in relative safety.
The ultimate hope for humanity lies beyond Earth itself. Before the outbreak, a team of astronauts had been working on plans to colonize other planets. With Earth overrun, many pinned their hopes on the idea that these astronauts might find a way to establish new human colonies on Mars, or even the Moon. Mars, with its relatively hospitable conditions compared to other celestial bodies, was the prime candidate. The stranded astronauts had been working to build self-sustaining habitats, grow food, and develop life support systems. If successful, this project could offer humanity a chance to escape. The Moon, while less hospitable, had the advantage of being closer. However, building a colony there would require advanced technology to protect against radiation, extreme temperatures, and the lack of resources. If the astronauts managed to secure a foothold in space, it would mean hope for some of humanity's survival. But here lay the grim reality. Space travel was a privilege only the wealthy could afford. The spacecraft and initial colonies were not built for mass evacuation. The rich and powerful would have the first tickets off this doomed planet, leaving the rest to fend for themselves. For those left behind, survival came down to luck and resilience. Communities in remote areas had to band together, share resources, and hope that eventually the infected would burn themselves out.
Others speculated about a cosmic intervention, a massive asteroid strike, much like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. The death toll of humans will be devastating, but most humans can survive because they are already living in bunkers and underground tunnels. Perhaps such an event could wipe the Earth clean of the infection, allowing it to heal over millennia. If the survivors in space manage to wait it out, they could one day return to a world cleansed of the prion's devastation.
In the meantime, life on Earth had become a struggle for existence, with every day marked by uncertainty and fear.
Those who survived did so not only through careful planning and fortification, but also by clinging to hope. Hope that one day humanity would find its way back from the brink of extinction. The world as it was known had changed forever, and the future lay in the hands of those willing to adapt, endure, and fight for a new beginning.